He cheated death, but not a boulder. He fooled the gods, but he paid the ultimate price for his deceit. Keep watching to find out what's up with Sisyphus and why his life is tragic beyond the absurd. While the complete life story of Sisyphus is generally not well known to the average person, the name should ring a bell. He's that guy that pushes that rock. The actual origin of the name Sisyphus is unknown, but Greek lexicographers suggest the name might be ultimately derived from the word sophos, meaning wise or clever. This hints at Sisyphus's mythological function as a man so crafty he could trick the gods, which, if you can trick even the most powerful gods, they don't seem as powerful, do they?
You have no power here.
According to the mythological work known as the Library, Sisyphus came from a pretty notable family. He was only a few generations away from Deucalion, the man sometimes called the Greek Noah. He and his wife, Pyrrha, were the ones who survived when Zeus flooded the world. They were responsible for repopulating humanity. Their son was named Hellen, after whom Greece was named, and Helen's sons included Aeolus, who became the king of Thessaly. Sisyphus, then, was one of the 4 sons of Aeolus, though this varies from source to source, all of whom, despite being great kings, came to very tragic ends. Sisyphus, however, was the cause of his own undoing. Sisyphus was the founder of a city called Ephyra, later known as Corinth, which he managed through his legendary shrewdness to build into a great commercial center and seaport. However, he was also extremely deceitful and ruthless, as he'd often kill his guests for financial gain. Such actions were violations of the Greek concept of xenia, the sacred relation between host and guest, of which Zeus himself is directly the guardian. This would not be the last time Sisyphus angered Zeus, though. While Sisyphus was notorious for his violations of xenia, that isn't the crime he's famously punished for in the realm of Tartarus. The thing that ultimately got Sisyphus into most famous person in hell level territory was the sin of ratting out Zeus when he was with a lady. In this particular instance, out of hundreds, the lady in question was Aegina. As Theoi Project, a Greek mythology site, describes her, Aegina was a nymph and the daughter of the river god Sisyphus. Zeus, desiring this fair maiden, disguised himself as an eagle and secretly departed with her to an island that would subsequently bear her name. Sisyphus chased after the bird-shaped god abducting his daughter but couldn't find them. His searches eventually brought him to Corinth, where he asked King Sisyphus if he had seen anything. Sisyphus refused to tell Sisyphus anything until the god granted his request of creating a freshwater spring on Corinth's Acropolis. Once the god complied, Sisyphus told Sisyphus he had seen a giant bird flying with a young maiden to a nearby island. Sisyphus then tracks Zeus down, but Zeus chases him back to his river with a barrage of thunderbolts. As adolescent as it sounds, snitching is what ultimately puts Sisyphus in eternal punishment. But don't sigh with relief just yet. His crimes are not done. While Sisyphus now has multiple crimes weighing against him, he only made things worse for himself by using his legendary cunning ways in order to escape the punishment set out for him by the gods.
Defile this house further and you will risk the wrath of the gods.
According to Theoi, there was a now-lost satirical play of Aeschylus called Sisyphus the Runaway that tells the story in humorous fashion of how the Corinthian king evaded divine judgment for as long as he could. According to this story, after Sisyphus had revealed Zeus and Aegina's location to Sisyphus, Zeus decided to kill the human king by sending Thanatos, the god of death himself, to escort him to the underworld. When Thanatos arrived, Sisyphus assumed ignorance and told the god of death that he didn't understand how his chains worked and how he was supposed to be bound. Thanatos obligingly demonstrated how one should be chained up, at which point Sisyphus took Death himself as his prisoner. Once Death was imprisoned, nothing on Earth could die. This curse didn't just include humans. It also meant animals killed for sacrifice or even a meal were just running around bleeding, unable to die. The gods were upset they couldn't receive sacrifices. The god that was most upset, though, was Ares, the god of war, whose ability to slaughter people was the only thing he had going for him. Ares released Death and sent Sisyphus to Hades. At this point, you're likely thinking, well, that's it for old Sisyphus. He had a good run, but now he is definitely dead and being punished like he's famous for. Well, think again. Before he was dragged off to the underworld by Thanatos, Sisyphus told his wife Merope to throw his dead body naked and uncovered into the middle of the town square. Fans of Greek mythology will know how this pans out. The soul of an unburied body will not be allowed to cross the river Styx into the underworld. This also means their ghost will be doomed to wander aimlessly on its banks. As you can guess, this is what happened to Sisyphus, to the frustration of the gods. The queen of the underworld, Persephone, approached Sisyphus and asked him what had happened. He said that his foolish wife must have neglected to bury him properly. He also added that it would be a simple enough matter for him to pop back home and scold her until she had given him a funeral. Persephone, convinced by this argument for some reason, agreed to send Sisyphus back. Naturally, instead of telling his wife to bury him and returning to the underworld, Sisyphus stayed at home and just kept on being alive. Eventually, however, Persephone figured out that she had been tricked, and Hermes, the conductor of the dead, was sent to personally escort Sisyphus to the underworld for good this time. Sisyphus now is dead.
What do you mean dead?
The spark of his life is smothered in His spirit is gone, but his stench remains.
Now that Sisyphus had finally died for real, Zeus took it upon himself to make the Corinthian king's eternal torment so notable that no other human would ever try to use cunning to overturn the natural order of things. Sisyphus was made an example of, becoming a representation of the foolishness of trying to escape fate and overturn the will of the gods, specifically in trying to, quote, avoid humanity's sad but inescapable lot of mortality. His fate, of course, is famous. It's literally the reason you've ever heard of Sisyphus. In Homer's Odyssey, the hero Odysseus describes the torture of Sisyphus fruitlessly rolling a rock uphill, saying, "Then I witnessed the torture of Sisyphus as he wrestled with a huge rock with both hands. Bracing himself and thrusting with hands and feet, he pushed the boulder uphill to the top." Zeus condemns Sisyphus' excessive pride by giving him a long, tedious, arduous task that he can't think or con his way out of. This reminds Sisyphus, and thus humanity as a whole, that you can't outsmart the king of the gods. Homer's Odyssey illustrated this fruitless task given to Sisyphus, writing, "But every time, as he was about to send it toppling over the crest, its sheer weight turned it back, and once again towards the plain the pitiless rock rolled down. So once more he had to wrestle with the thing and push it up, while the sweat poured from his limbs and the dust rose high above his head." While Sisyphus might be the most famous of the cleverly punished denizens of Tartarus, he's far from the only one. The colorful punishments of Hades are often decked out when mythological figures like Orpheus and Aeneas make a descent into the underworld. The Odyssey describes Odysseus seeing a good number of tortured souls when he journeys down to the house of Hades. His journey into Hades was to consult with the ghost of the seer Tiresias, including the titan Tydeus, who, like Prometheus, has his liver eaten by vultures every day, only for it to regrow in the night. However, there are a couple of tortured souls in Hades whose punishments reflect futility and frustration, just as Sisyphus' rolling rock does. One of these is Tantalus. Tantalus was punished for two things. He was first punished for stealing the holy food of the gods when invited to their table, a violation of Xenia. He was also punished for killing and cooking his son Pelops and serving him to the gods. His punishment? He was made eternally hungry and thirsty while standing in a pool of water under a fruit tree, with both water and food just outside of his reach. The other example is the 49 daughters of Danaus. They were all condemned for the crime of murdering their husbands on their wedding night. Their punishment? The endless task of trying to fill a tub to wash away their crimes with water, carried in a leaky sieve. So, we've established that Sisyphus is, of course, a well-known mythological figure due to his eternal punishment, and we've seen that he's had some rather notable forebears. But Sisyphus also had some famous offspring as well, some of whom inherited his penchant for cleverness. Sisyphus' wife, who he of course roped into his death-cheating schemes, was Merope, a sea nymph who was one of the 7 daughters of the titan Atlas. Atlas, as you know, was the one who held up the sky. The 7 daughters of Atlas were known as the Pleiades, who are today best known as the star cluster of that name. Sisyphus and Merope had several sons, including Glaucus, whose main achievement was being eaten by his own horses. More importantly, however, Glaucus was the father of Bellerophon, the human hero best known for taming Pegasus and slaying the Chimera. However, Sisyphus may have had an even more famous descendant, the master thief Autolycus.
It's just a lousy little ruby. It's not even worth talking about. They won't even know that it's gone.
Look! The ruby! It's gone!
While Autolycus wasn't exactly stealing rubies from Sisyphus, he was stealing cattle from him. When Sisyphus figured it out, he repaid the thief by seducing his daughter Anticlea, the mother of Odysseus. While Odysseus' father was officially the king Laertes, many actually believe the cleverest hero of the Greek forces of Troy, Odysseus, was the progeny of 2 of the craftiest men who ever lived, Autolycus, the king of thieves, and Sisyphus, the man who cheated death twice. So, great. We've gone over the story from Sisyphus' birth to death, and then second death, and then third death, and then some. But what does the story mean? And why the rock? Where did the imagery of a man eternally and vainly rolling a rock up a hill come from? The punishment appears in the earliest mentions of Sisyphus in both the Iliad and the Odyssey, and the story of how he got there only shows up later. So it stands to reason that the image of a man pushing a rock came first, and the justification was a revision by later mythographers. Many myths began as an attempt to explain natural phenomena, and the story of Sisyphus may be no exception. For some comparative mythologists, the perpetual rolling up and rolling down of Sisyphus' stone is reflective of the rising and setting of the sun. Though it might also be worth noting that for a while in the 19th century, some comparative mythologists thought everything was about the sun. For others, however, it represents different cyclical, periodic natural phenomenon. It represented things like the rising and falling waves, or even humanity's futile but persistent pursuit of knowledge. By now, it should seem pretty easy to see how the story of Sisyphus, despite whatever its naturalistic origins may or may not have been, has become a metaphor for the frustration that comes from working diligently on some task for absolutely no reason at all. As a result, you can probably see the appeal in Sisyphus as a figure for the absurdist movement. For the unfamiliar, the absurdist movement is a philosophical school of thought that examines the tension between the innate human search for meaning in the universe and the inability to find that meaning.
The universe and everything is 42.
In fact, one of the foundational texts of absurdism, a 1942 essay by Albert Camus, is called The Myth of Sisyphus. The myth of Sisyphus uses Sisyphus's boulder rolling as a metaphor for the meaninglessness of existence. Just as Sisyphus can never push the boulder over the top, humanity can never manage to find meaning in a meaningless world. According to Camus, suicide wasn't a way out of the world's meaninglessness either. In fact, he viewed suicide as a rejection of freedom. So, if we, like Sisyphus, are trapped in an absurd existence and suicide is taken off the table as an option for escape, the only solution for us, and for Sisyphus, is to accept our situation and find joy in it. For both us and Sisyphus, finding joy in pointless drudgery is, in itself, an act of rebellion. Camus believed that only by finding joyful acceptance of the absurd can one find freedom and definition of identity.